I'm recording this the easiest way I know how, because writing it out still feels strange, even after all these years. The timeline is a little blurry now, 6, maybe 7 years ago. Life got messy after that, and a lot of memories have tangled together. But this night, this one never faded. It was New Year's Eve. Back then, I was still with my ex, Duda. We had just left a party and were heading back to her place sometime after midnight. I remember how exhausted I felt. Yet driving that late on New Year's isn't ideal, but staying wasn't an option. We'd been last-minute guests, and there was nowhere for us to crash. The trip home was about half an hour. The streets were nearly empty, which honestly felt like a relief. Earlier that day it had snowed, and the roads were slick and unpredictable. The last thing I needed was traffic on top of the ice and the fatigue creeping in behind my eyes. Duda had already drifted off in the passenger seat. I kept the heat high and blasted a random rock playlist, anything to stay alert and focused. The car hummed steadily through the quiet streets, and for a while everything felt calm. We were only about 10 minutes from her place when something happened that I still can't fully explain. And from that moment on, the night stopped feeling ordinary. I wish I could explain what I saw in a way that makes sense, but the truth is, it didn't make sense even in the moment. The road ahead had been completely empty, quiet, still, just snow, headlights, and darkness stretching forward. And then suddenly, she was there. Not walking, not crossing, standing, right in the middle of the road, facing my car like she had been waiting for us. My mind couldn't catch up to what my eyes were seeing. My foot slammed the brakes before I even understood why. The car jolted, the tires fighting for grip on the ice. That's when the headlights fully hit her, while she was holding something down at her side. A knife. Not a small one either. A large kitchen blade, the kind meant for heavy cutting. The metal flashed white in the light. Her face looked wrong, twisted, tense, like she was crying or screaming, or both at the same time. There was a kind of desperation there that made my stomach drop. I reacted on instinct. I jerked the wheel hard to the right to avoid her. The moment I did, she moved. She lunged toward the car, and I heard the sound before I understood what happened. A sharp, heavy impact as we passed her. In that split second, I realized she had swung the knife at the vehicle, but the swerve on the ice was already too much. The tires lost traction, and suddenly we weren't driving anymore. We were spinning. Duda woke up instantly, screaming, grabbing at the dashboard as the world outside the windows turned into a blur of headlights, snow, and darkness. I held the steering wheel with both hands, but it felt useless. The car had a mind of its own. We spun all the way around. When the car finally stopped, we were facing the opposite direction. For a second, everything went quiet. No movement. No sound except our breathing and the engine humming. Then I looked up through the windshield, and my stomach dropped. Because now our headlights were shining back down the road we had just come from, and she was still there. She stood about 30 feet away, frozen in the center of our headlights. The light hit her full on, turning her into something harsh and unreal, like a figure cut out of the darkness. The knife was still in her hand. She had started moving toward us, but something about her walk was off. She was limping, dragging one leg, trying to move faster than her body would allow. And she was making noise. Not words, not anything human or clear. Just a raw, strange sound that came out in broken bursts, somewhere between a cry and a growl. Hana, the kind of sound that makes your chest tighten before your brain even understands why. Duda was shouting at me to go, to move, to do something, but I couldn't. I was locked in place, staring. Her clothes were filthy and torn. Her hair hung in tangled clumps around her face, and her eyes. That was the worst part. There was no focus, no emotion, no recognition. It was like looking at someone who wasn't fully there anymore. Like her body was moving, but whatever made her human was gone. When she got close enough that I could see her clearly without squinting, instinct finally took over. I threw the car into drive and slammed the gas. For one long, terrifying second, the tires spun uselessly against the ice. The engine roared, but we didn't move. Then suddenly the wheels caught. The car lunged forward. I thought we were past her. I thought we had made it. I was wrong. There was a heavy thud against the front of the car, hard enough to shake the entire frame. Before I could even process what happened, she was there, on the hood. She had thrown herself onto it. Duda started screaming. I shouted something I don't even remember, and right in front of me, only inches beyond the glass, the woman was clinging to the hood with one hand. The other hand kept striking the glass again and again. The blade struck the windshield again and again, each hit sharp and loud inside the car. Not enough to break through, but enough to send cracks of fear straight through my chest. It felt like she was trying to get inside, like she wasn't going to stop until she did. My vision narrowed. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe properly. I just yanked the wheels side to side as hard as I could, swerving across the icy road. Her body slid across the hood with each turn, but she refused to let go. Her face was pressed close to the glass now, her mouth open, that same horrible sound still coming out. Winter, and the entire time, her eyes were locked on mine, not blinking, not looking away, just staring. On the third or fourth violent swerve, her grip finally broke. I saw her slide off the edge of the hood and hit the road hard, her body rolling once before skidding into the shoulder. The car fishtailed again, but this time I managed to fight it back under control. I forced myself to look in the rearview mirror. She was lying there in the snow, and she wasn't moving. I slowed down without even realizing it. A part of me wanted to stop. It sounds irrational after everything that had just happened, but one thought kept forcing its way through the panic. What if she was hurt because of us? What if she wasn't some threat anymore? What if she had just been a person who needed help? Before I could make a decision, Duda grabbed my arm. Her hand was shaking so badly it almost hurt. "Don't stop," she kept saying. "Just go, please." "Nyari, just go." Her voice wasn't calm or logical. It was sharp, urgent, almost desperate. She kept repeating that we couldn't get involved, that whatever happened back there wasn't our responsibility, that stopping would only make things worse. I suggested calling the police. She shut that down immediately. She started talking fast. Too fast. Saying we'd been drinking earlier, that no one would believe what we'd seen, that the situation would somehow get turned against us. At the time, the way she said it made everything feel immediate and dangerous. Looking back, none of it really added up. But in that moment, I listened. I drove. We went straight home. And we told no one. The physical damage to the car was minor. A cracked windshield, deep scrape marks along the driver's side glass, and a few dents across the hood. What bothered me more was what wasn't there. There was no blood, nothing. I had the repairs done about a week later, but fixing the car didn't fix the feeling that something was unfinished. For months afterward, I checked local news sites almost every day, half expecting to see a report about a woman found on the roadside, or someone missing. Nothing ever showed up. No accident, no investigation, no mention of anything. I still don't know if that made it better or worse. Sometimes I wonder if she got up after we left and just disappeared into the woods. Other times, I wonder if I don't actually want to know what happened. What unsettled me almost as much as the night itself was Duda. Within days, she acted like nothing had happened. No anxiety, no guilt, no questions. She went back to normal life, work, friends, plans for the weekend, like that night had never existed. When I tried to bring it up, she brushed it off and told me I was overthinking it, that we did what we had to do, that it was over. Chobo, I remember looking at her and realizing something felt different. Not about the situation, about her. We broke up a few months later for unrelated reasons. Mostly unrelated, because the truth is, after that night, I couldn't stop thinking about how quickly she had decided to leave someone behind, and how easily she moved on. I don't know what happened to that woman. I don't know how close we came to something worse, but I do know this. Nights like that don't just fade. Somewhere out there, the story ended. I just don't know how. If you've ever experienced something on the road that you still can't explain, share it in the comments. And if stories like this stay with you the way they stayed with me, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, shared weekly. A few years later, I heard a story that unsettled me in a completely different way. Back in college, I studied at UC Berkeley. And that's where I met one of my closest friends, Garrett. His real name is Guo, but when we met freshman year, he introduced himself using an English name, and it stuck. He's originally from Hong Kong, came to the US for computer science, and honestly, he's one of the sharpest people I've ever known. After graduation, our lives split geographically. I moved to New York for work. He went back to Hong Kong and built his career there. Now we're both in our late 20s, both doing well, and both single, and we make an effort to see each other at least once or twice a year. Either he flies out, or I head over to Asia. I know that kind of flexibility is rare, and I don't take it for granted. What happened between us last New Year's Eve, though, is something I still think about constantly. I've told a few people the story. Most don't know what to make of it. Honestly, neither do I. Here's the part that matters. Hong Kong is 13 hours ahead of New York. When the clock hits midnight there, it's still late morning on December 31st in New York. Garrett celebrates both the Western New Year and Lunar New Year, so he was out celebrating that night. So was I, just half a world apart. I spent the evening with two close friends, Rylan and Eerie. We started with drinks at Rylan's apartment before heading to a rooftop party in Williamsburg. One of Eerie's co-workers had invited us. The place was crowded, lively, and surprisingly upscale. For a while, it just felt like a normal New Year's Eve. I had no idea that before the night was over, something impossible was about to connect two cities, two timelines, and the same girl. Sometime around 11:30, I noticed her standing alone near the bar. She wasn't doing anything unusual. No dramatic entrance, no obvious reason she stood out. But something about her pulled my attention. Maybe it was the way she seemed completely calm in the middle of all the noise, like the crowd wasn't really touching her. Oh, I walked over and introduced myself. From the first few seconds, the conversation just flowed. She was easy to talk to, sharp, funny, fully present in a way that made the rest of the party fade into the background. There was an energy about her that's hard to explain, not loud or attention-seeking, just magnetic. We talked for a few minutes before she smiled, grabbed my hand, and pulled me onto the dance floor. That's when I asked her name. She said it once, and I asked her to repeat it because I'd never heard anything like it before. Mitra, she said again, laughing. Most people just say, my tree. It's easier. There was something warm and playful about the way she said it. Then she did something I didn't expect. She grabbed a pen from the bar and wrote the spelling on my hand. Just in case you forget, she joked. At the time, it felt like a small, charming moment. Looking back, it feels strange that she made sure I would remember. Midnight came, the countdown hit, the crowd cheered, and somewhere in all of that noise, we kissed. After that, the night seemed to move quickly. More talking, more dancing, and a growing feeling that I'd known her longer than just a few hours. Around 12:30, she leaned in and asked if I wanted to leave. We called a ride and headed back to my apartment in the East Village. I'll skip over the obvious parts. What matters is what came after. We didn't just fall asleep right away. We stayed up for a while talking, and that's when I learned more about her. Details that, at the time, felt random and casual. She grew up in San Diego. She was a painter, though she said she started out doing graffiti and large murals before moving into more traditional work. Her middle name was Mia, which also happened to be the name of one of her cats. The other one was called Cosmo. Her birthday was April 28th. She told me about a childhood friend from a tiny town in Germany, a place I'd never heard of and couldn't pronounce. Her father worked as a patent attorney. Small details, specific details, the kind of things you don't usually make up. I didn't realize it then, but those details would matter later. At some point, she mentioned that her clothes smelled like the bar. I offered to wash them, and she changed into one of my t-shirts while they were in the dryer. It all felt normal, comfortable, and easy. Eventually, sometime deep into the night, we fell asleep. If the story ended there, it would have just been another New Year's memory. But when I woke up the next morning, nothing about it made sense. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the silence. She wasn't next to me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. People leave early all the time. No awkward goodbyes, no morning conversation. Just slip out quietly and move on. I figured that's what she'd done. Then I got up. And that's when things started to feel off. My apartment door has a simple lock, the kind that only stays locked if you turn the key from the outside. It doesn't lock automatically. but when I walked past it on the way to the bathroom, I stopped. The lock was still set, which meant one of two things. Either she had somehow locked the door from the outside without a key, or she had never left. Neither option made sense. Now fully awake, I checked the entire apartment. It's small. One bedroom, a bathroom, a living area, and a compact kitchen. There's nowhere to hide, no second exit, no back stairwell, nothing. The windows only open a few inches, not nearly enough for anyone to climb through. Still, I checked everything. Every corner, behind doors, even the closet, which, looking back, felt ridiculous. She wasn't there. That's when the situation started to feel less confusing and more impossible. For a moment, I actually questioned my memory. I wondered if the night had been a blur, if maybe I'd imagined parts of it. Maybe I'd been more drunk than I realized. But then I checked the laundry. Her clothes were gone from the dryer. The t-shirt I'd lent her was gone too, which meant she had been there. She had slept in my apartment, and now she wasn't. I started pacing, going from room to room again, half expecting her to step out from somewhere and laugh it off, like there was some simple explanation I just hadn't thought of yet. Well, there wasn't. No sign of her, no message, no trace. That's when another problem hit me. I didn't have her number, no last name, no social media, no way to contact her at all. All I had were the small details she'd told me the night before. San Diego, painter, April 28th. 2 cats, Mia and Cosmo. I spent the rest of the day repeating those facts in my head, over and over, like I was trying to keep her from disappearing completely. Because the more I thought about it, the more it felt like something about that night wasn't just strange, it felt wrong. Later that afternoon, I felt this sudden urge to call Garrett. There was no reason for it. No plan, no specific story I needed to tell him. The feeling just showed up out of nowhere, strong enough that I stopped what I was doing and dialed his number. At first, the conversation was normal. We caught up on work, life, and how each of us had spent New Year's Eve. And the usual stuff, but something about his tone felt off, distracted, a little low. So I asked him what was going on. There was a pause. Then he sighed and said he'd met a girl the night before. They'd connected quickly, gone back to his place, talked for hours. And then, the next morning, she was gone. No goodbye, no number, no way to reach her. He sounded disappointed, confused. I actually laughed, because the exact same thing had just happened to me. Same night, same situation. Same kind of disappearance. For a moment, it just felt like a strange coincidence. Then he told me her name. Mitra, he said, pronounced like my tree. The moment I heard it, a cold feeling ran straight through me. I didn't tell him anything yet. I just asked him to describe her. He started listing details. From San Diego, painter, used to do graffiti, birthday in April. My chest tightened. I cut him off and asked one question. Did she have a cat named Mia? There was silence on the other end. Then he said yes. After that, the conversation turned into something neither of us could really process. For the next 15 minutes, we compared everything we could remember. Background, personal details, random little facts she had mentioned. Every single one matched. And then it got worse. Garrett told me he had taken pictures with her. He sent them. It looked exactly like the same girl to both of us. We tried to come up with explanations. Twins, fake identities, some kind of elaborate coincidence, but the timeline didn't work. Hong Kong is 13 hours ahead of New York. He met her late at night on December 31st, Hong Kong time. I met her late at night on December 31st, New York time. That's roughly a 12-hour gap, but a flight between those cities takes at least 15 to 17 hours. Even if she had left his place and gone straight to the airport, as far as we could tell, there was no realistic way she could have arrived in New York in time. The math didn't work. And even if you ignore the travel time, how would she know where I'd be? How would she end up at that exact rooftop party? How would every detail be identical? Same name, same background, same life. Garrett and I have talked about it many times since then. Every conversation ends the same way. No explanation. Neither of us ever saw her again. What unsettles me the most isn't the mystery. It's how real it all was. I didn't imagine her. I spent hours talking to her. She slept in my apartment. Her clothes were in my dryer. Then she was gone, even though the apartment was locked and I couldn't figure out how she could have left. We tried searching for her online. Without a last name and only vague details, there was nothing to find. No artist profile, no social media, no trace. Every year when New Year's Eve comes around, I think about it again. How do most strange experiences fade over time? This one hasn't. If anything, it feels more unsettling the longer I sit with it. Because after going through every logical explanation I could think of, I'm left with a possibility that still doesn't make sense. And I wish I had a better answer than this. But sometimes I wonder if that night, I met someone I still can't explain. What do you think really happened? Coincidence, mistaken identity, or something stranger? Let me know below. And subscribe if you enjoy stories that don't always have clear answers. And if you think that was unsettling, my dad's story is even harder to explain? Coincidence, mistaken identity, or something stranger? Let me know your thoughts below and subscribe if you enjoy true stories that don't always have clear answers. This last story didn't happen to me. It happened to my dad, long before I was born. And the way he tells it, even now, you can hear the part of him that never really found an explanation. Back in his 20s, before kids and responsibilities, my parents traveled constantly. My dad had done well for himself early, made a few smart business decisions, and suddenly he had something most people don't at that age: time and the money to enjoy it. Both of them loved skiing, and for people living in New York, Vermont was the closest place that really offered it. Over the years, and they ended up investing in a few small vacation properties up there. The first one was an old place locals referred to as the Black House, a weathered lodge with dark shutters and a long history. They owned it for a while, shared time there with friends, and eventually moved on to a second property. The next place was even more secluded. It sat along Route 100 in an area people called the Lake District, a quiet stretch where several frozen lakes lined the road. Their lodge stood right on the edge of one of them, surrounded by trees, snow, and almost nothing else for miles. This time, my dad went in on the property with his college friend Victor and Victor's wife, Lisa. The four of them would take trips up there regularly, but the night this happened, it was just the two of them. My mom and Lisa were away for a wedding, so my dad and Victor decided to head up to the lodge on their own to spend New Year's Eve there. No parties, no crowds, just quiet. Later that night, they were upstairs sitting near the large windows that overlooked the frozen lake. They had a couple of drinks, some music playing softly, and snow drifting down outside. My dad always said the silence out there was different from the city. Not empty, still. The kind of stillness where you feel completely removed from the rest of the world. They talked for hours, watching the snow collect across the ice, waiting for midnight to come. Everything about the night felt calm, peaceful, normal, and then, without warning, something lit up the entire lake. The change happened so suddenly it didn't even feel real at first. One moment they were talking, relaxed, watching the snow drift across the frozen lake. The next moment, the entire landscape exploded with light. My dad said it was like someone had set off a massive flash on the far side of the lake, bright enough to wash the windows white. His first instinct was fireworks, but something about it was wrong. The light hadn't come from the sky, it came from the ground, and there was no sound, just a silent burst that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Victor stood up immediately and moved closer to the window, staring out across the ice. My dad asked what he was looking at. Victor didn't answer right away. Then he said he thought something was moving out there. At first, my dad dismissed it. That side of the lake was nothing but woods. No cabins, no roads, no trails. There was no reason for anyone to be out there, especially in the middle of winter late at night. But Victor kept watching, and the longer he stared, the more certain he became. "There's someone out there," he said. Before my dad could argue, Victor was already grabbing his coat and boots. My dad tried to stop him. The whole situation felt off, but Victor was determined, already heading downstairs. Not wanting him to go alone, my dad threw on his jacket and followed. They stepped out onto the back deck, and that's when they heard it. A voice, small, thin, distant, a child. At first it was faint, carried across the frozen air. But then it came again, clearer this time, crying for help, over and over. My dad said the sound cut straight through the quiet, impossible to ignore. The lake had been frozen solid for months, thick enough to walk on without question. They didn't stop to think. They stepped off the deck and began moving out across the ice. As they got closer, they could see a shape ahead, small, standing alone near the far side. The figure didn't move much, just stood there against the snow. It was definitely a child, maybe 20 or 30 yards away. My dad said he could feel the unease growing with every step. Something about the stillness of the figure didn't match the cries they were hearing. Then the light came again. Another blinding flash, brighter than before. It hit so hard he had to shield his eyes and drop down, the world disappearing into white for a few seconds. When his vision finally cleared, he looked back toward the spot where the child had been standing. There was nothing there. No footprints, no movement, no figure, just an empty stretch of frozen lake. That was the moment curiosity turned into fear. Neither of them said a word. They turned around and ran back toward the house as fast as they could, the silence behind them somehow feeling worse than the voice had been. My dad said he was running as fast as he could without losing his footing on the ice. The house was getting closer, the lights in the windows finally within reach. Victor was a few steps ahead when he suddenly stopped and shouted. He was pointing toward the second floor. "There's someone in there," he yelled. Not an adult, a child. My dad looked up immediately. All he saw was the dark reflection of the snowy yard in the glass. Nothing moving, no silhouette, no face. But Victor kept insisting he had seen a small figure standing at the window, watching them. At that point, my dad didn't argue. He just wanted to get inside. They hurried up to the deck, went straight through the back door, and began checking the entire house. Every room, every closet, every corner. Nothing. All the doors were locked from the inside. Every window was sealed tight. No footprints, no signs of entry, no indication that anyone had been there at all. The house was exactly the way they had left it. Neither of them wanted to talk about what had happened outside. They agreed to call it a night, but sleep didn't come easily. Sometime later, my dad woke up. At first, he thought the sound was part of a dream. Then he heard it again, a child laughing, soft, distant, somewhere inside the house. He lay there in the dark, holding his breath, trying to figure out where it was coming from. The sound stopped, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the noise itself. He fell asleep again eventually, only to wake up later to the same thing. Another faint burst of laughter that faded away before he could place it. Years later, when he told me the story, he said something that stuck with me. The part that disturbed him the most wasn't the figure on the lake. It wasn't what Victor thought he saw in the window. It was the light, that sudden, blinding flash that appeared out of nowhere. No thunder. No fireworks, no sound, no source, just light, twice, and then nothing. He and Victor talked about it for years afterward, trying to explain it away. Maybe distant fireworks, maybe a flare, maybe some kind of rare weather phenomenon. But none of the explanations ever really fit. Eventually, they cut the trip short. They didn't even tell my mom or Lisa about it until much later. Even now, my dad doesn't claim to know what happened that night. He's told me the story a few times over the years. And every time he reaches the part about the light, his voice slows down, like he's still trying to make sense of it. I asked him once if he thought it was something beyond explanation. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just shrugged and said, "I don't know what else it could have been." Have you ever seen something you couldn't explain? Tell your story in the comments. And if you enjoy quiet, unsettling, true encounters like this, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.